Guys, it is Fishing ND here, back with another video. Today I will be explaining my top 10 favorite baits, but first I would like to thank Catch and Cole for staying with us in our last year. I know we did not do as much as we should have, nor as much as we could have with promoting you, and we are going to change that here in a little bit. We've got some ideas, or I've got some ideas. My dad hasn't heard them yet. For some stuff definitely coming out this winter once ice gets out. Right now it's negative 30 degrees outside, and it's been this way for the past 2 days. Hopefully it doesn't heat up so we can get some good ice and go ice fishing and maybe try some baits in the ice. Who knows? But without further ado, my top 10 favorite soft plastic baits. We've got my number 10. And right here we've got a paddle tail. Usually I would be using a black with a white underbelly and maybe a red hint towards the back. But pretty much we've got this brown one which has produced quite a bit of fish. And pretty much you just rig it up simple with a jig head. Easiest and probably most effective way to rig it up, besides maybe adding the additional beetle spin. But this bait has probably caught more fish than I would say any other soft plastic besides maybe a spinning tail grub on the planet, because I would say it's probably been around one of the longest, you know. My number 9 favorite bait would be a bigger fluke, rigged Texas style. You guys can't see the hook, but I do have one in there. It is rigged in. It's a little bit small for this bait, which I probably could change and show you guys, but I think I'm going to save that for a video on how I rig up my soft plastics. But yeah, pretty much here you've got the fluke. A lot of people rig them with bullet weights so they can get down a little bit deeper. It just depends on what you're doing in your situation. Number, I already lost count. 8. This would be just a little natural craw presentation. Usually works a lot in early spring and late fall. This is on a swim jig. These can be used like swimming them like you would another bait, just deeper down in the water column. You can see it's got a pretty small Catch and Cole Baits swim jig on it, and pretty much this is one of my favorite ways to rig this. We've also got it on a punch rig setup. Obviously you can see the difference between the swim jig and the punch jig. You've got that, and then you've got just the single. The punch jig is really good if you're working around heavy lily pads or big weed mats, and you know there's like you can see little holes, and you know there's little tunnel systems down there. I've caught so many fish out of those little tunnel systems that it's just made it worth fishing a punch jig. Like usually in Michigan you're not gonna need a big heavy punch jig, but if you're down south you're definitely gonna need a punch jig for something like that. Number 7, we've got here a little white small fluke. Pretty much the way I rig this, you can rig this Texas, but the way I prefer to rig it is a drop shot. You got your weight, your hook, and then you would have line going to a rod. You just rig it through the nose. Make sure you got it like this, and that way it's pretty effective to rig it. That's probably one of the most effective ways to rig it. That's got quite a bit of the fish we've caught in tournaments this year have come off of either those or some of the baits I'm about to show you. Heavy hitter is a tube. I prefer to use a darker tube like this or a darker green tube. Pretty much right now, you guys can't see it, but it's got a jig head inside of it. And pretty much that allows for you to not have a big giant jig head hanging off the front of it that might be off colored or might offset it enough for a fish to sort of turn its head. And looks something like this. That's kind of what you would buy if you were looking for jig heads to go inside of tubes. I think, pretty sure. We've got a little Sluggo. This is probably one of the most effective baits we used early spring. And later spring we caught a bunch of fish on these. Just using them the same way. Just a drop shot through the nose. And just pretty much like if you've got a spot, and say you've got a spot with you got trees on one side and weed vegetation, and then it opens up, if you can get it right in between there and then just hold it there but kind of sort of make it flutter, that's a really easy way to get bites on that. We've got a Reaction Innovations Sweet Beaver on a Catch and Cool Baits swim jig, and most people think, well, why would you swim something like this? Because if a crawfish during the day is trying to get out, it's trying to move, say a smallmouth just attacked it and it's running from the smallmouth, it's gonna glide up and then into a rock, and pretty much you can swim these with a little bit of action, and just pop it every once in a while, get that back end moving, get the craws moving. I don't know if you've ever seen any videos of crawfish moving backwards, but oftentimes their craws, their actual pinchers will move. And then here we've got it on a normal jig rigged for just dragging it across the bottom. You give it a couple bits and then you drop it, and you give it a couple bits and then you drop it. And that's probably one of the most effective ways to catch big fish other than a wobblehead on this bait. I'll show you guys what a wobblehead looks like here. A lot of people mix this up and call this a shaky head. Me and my dad called it a shaky head for the longest time because, I'll show you here, this head shakes. Shaky head. So you would think. No, a shaky head actually looks quite a bit more like this. That's more of a shaky head type thing. This is more, it's a shaky head. We'll call that a shaky head for right now. And that's a wobble head. These are probably one of the most effective ways I've ever used with these, but I've only got one left, so that's why it's not rigged up out here, because I don't want to drop it and then lose it and then not have it. Out here, a Gary Yamamoto double hula grub, and this bait has caught so many fish for me. We've gone days with catching just countless fish after fish after fish on something like this, or this with this style hook. I forget what these are called right now. I'll probably remember when I'm editing and go, wow, I'm an idiot, but right now I don't know, can't remember what those are called. But you got the Gary Yamamoto double hula grub behind a swim jig And if you're swimming this through the water, just sort of bouncing it along, it'll get a lot of strikes. And then you can rig it like this too. This is the double hula grub with a Mega Chomp Baits bug jig. And this thing has caught quite a few fish the last year. Pretty much you just get it on the bottom. The jig actually sits like that, so when it comes up, you know, you got it coming up, so these are spinning, doing their deal. You come back down, they're spinning, trigger a lot of fish to hit. Next here, we've got number 2. Right here, we've got probably one of the most effective baits I've used. I say that about all of these baits, but this is truly effective. This is a Gary Yamamoto swim Senko, and pretty much I've got this on a CNC Baits swim jig, and this has caught quite a few fish for me this last year. You know, we haven't had the best last year. Some of the stuff we would normally use hasn't been working, so we've been experimenting with a lot of stuff. This is actually a rig my dad had, and then I've used it quite a bit, but it's turned out to be pretty successful over the last year. And you can rig it up like this too. I prefer to rig them naked like this on this football head, and then you can just swim this through the water and sort of jerk it. But a thing that's unique that you don't see on a lot of paddle tail jigs like this is you got this little cutout, which means that this bait can be going super slow and still give off a crazy amount of action, like an insane amount of action. So that works extremely well when you're swimming it. And you could also bounce it. We bounced them. We've used them on drop shots. We've used them behind jig heads. I mean, you can fish them any way you want, and you'll probably still catch fish on them, so long as the fish are actually biting. Another this is number 1. This will always be number 1 in my book. I don't think these will ever stop catching fish. I have caught more fish on these in a day than I have caught on any other bait besides maybe an X-Rap. And it's just one of the most effective jigs. It's a Gary Yamamoto Senko in June bug. Sometimes I'll couple it with Liquid Mayhem. You guys are getting a lot of shake and take my hand up too. But couple that with a some Liquid Mayhem, and you've got a really effective bait. When we were on the Grand, our tournament on the Grand, that's what I caught a large majority of the fish that were in the boat on, and it is one of the most effective baits of all time. I would even go as far to say the best lure ever made from my point of view. Obviously, people out there got different opinions. They catch different stuff on different stuff, you know, bigger fish on different baits. But that is something that you can find in just about every fisherman's tackle box in America, I would bet. So long as they're not like either a deep sea guy, even though I bet you could probably catch a Goliath grouper on those pretty dang easy. And you gotta think Goliath grouper is just a really big smallmouth, and smallmouth seem to love them. So, you know, that's something you can probably find just about everywhere. Another way you can rig it is like this. Obviously, you can see I've got the little weedless hook. That's just so you can bounce it. I've found that these work extremely well when you're in really shallow water, especially like you got this one that's weightless. Say you want to drag something and give it a lot of action, like you can see just how much these things just flop around without effort. That's one of the things I love about Gary Yamamoto, is their plastic is strong yet completely flexible. Like, it's one of the best plastics on the market. And then obviously you just got that jig, just bounce it around, you can swim it. You can pretty much catch fish wearing these every and any way you want. Now a lot of the people complain, you'll see you got Yum and you've got other bait companies that have a similar color to this and the same size worm, and they'll be like $5, and you'll see a pack of Gary Yamamoto's next to it for $7. Personally, every time I'm always going to grab the Yamamoto's, but that's just because I'm partial. But a really good way to save money, if you are partial to Gary Yamamoto and you know they work well, but you're like, I don't have enough money to buy bags every time I go on a bad spree and I lose a bunch of them, is this little O-ring right here. Pretty much what you do is take the hook out. You take this, you slip your wacky worm into it, and then you slip these little O-rings down. You just slip it down the edge, pretty easy. And that gives you an O-ring on there. Obviously, I already had one on, so now I'm going to put a second one on because they do damage the bait when you take them off. They grab them pretty tight. And then you just take your hook, go under the O-ring, but not through the wacky rig. See, it's not touching. So you're going to rip a lot less baits, because when that fish hits and it pulls back, it's not pulling the wacky rig, it's pulling the O-ring, and it's not pulling the hook through your plastic. You might notice, like, do you get enough hits, your bait will turn white around that area, and that's just because of stretch, but it's not going to break nearly as often, and you can get the exact same amount of effectiveness out of this as you can going through the wacky worm itself, and you will use 10 times less easy. And pretty much a pack of 100 of these is dirt cheap. They're like $1. You can find them at Cabela's right next to a tool just like this that lets you slide them on. I've used in the past, I've used players, you can use players. All together, a pack of 100, and this might run you at most $6. It's less than the pack of wacky worms you're buying, and it is 100% worth it because you will save many, many, many wacky worms. And then it doesn't matter, they fit all wacky worms so long as they're like a 4-inch. Like, you go down to 3-inch and they're really thin, then you get iffy. But not many people use a 3-inch for an actual wacky, because then they start to lose their wobble. A lot of people use a 4-inch on up, and they're really effective. So yeah, pretty much that's all I have to cover in this video, is just my top 10. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Did you think I missed something? Do you think maybe something's not as effective as I portray it to be? Now, before you go and say this isn't as effective as I portray it to be, go out and use it for a year straight and comment under this video. And you probably won't be, because it's exactly as effective as I say it is, especially if you buy Liquid Mayhem for it. Because if you're on a bad day, nothing's biting on anything, either this or a green pumpkin with a little bit of Liquid Mayhem, you got yourself set. You've caught. Now you're catching fish already at that point. Pretty much you put the Liquid Mayhem on and the fish jump out of the water into your boat. That's how it works. You heard it here first. But that's all we got to cover today. I will see you guys in the next video. Till then, keep on fishing.